The most epic confrontation. Dean Martin's harmony restores order to Mafia chaos. The velvet voice in a concrete jungle. Las Vegas, 1963. The neon lights of the Strip burned like artificial stars against the desert night, casting long shadows across a city built on dreams, desperation, and deals made in smoke-filled rooms. The Sands Hotel stood as a monument to this glittering empire, and on its stage, Dean Martin held court like a king who ruled not with force but with charm. "That's amore." Dean's voice floated through the Copa room smooth as aged whiskey, wrapping around the audience like velvet. Women swooned, men raised their glasses, and for those precious moments, the world outside ceased to exist. Dean made it look effortless. The perfectly timed joke, the casual sip of what everyone assumed was whiskey but was actually apple juice. The way he could make every person in that packed room feel like he was singing directly to them. But Dean Martin, born Dino Paul Crocetti in Steubenville, Ohio, knew something that most of his audience didn't. He understood the delicate balance that kept Las Vegas spinning. He'd grown up around men who spoke in coded language and settled disputes with more than words. His childhood had been spent in the Steel Town's Italian neighborhood, where respect was currency and loyalty was law. Backstage after the show, Dean loosened his bow tie and lit a cigarette, his dark eyes reflecting something deeper than the carefree persona he projected on stage. His dressing room door opened without a knock, a liberty only a few men in Vegas would dare take. "Dino." The voice belonged to Sam Giancana, his tailored suit immaculate despite the late hour, his presence filling the room with an energy that made the air feel heavier. Behind him stood two men whose faces Dean recognized from the newspapers, though they'd never been formally introduced. Sam. Dean didn't show deference, but his tone carried respect. "Little late for a social call, ain't it?" Giancana smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We got a problem, Dean. The kind that needs a special touch. The kind that needs someone who can walk between worlds." Dean took a long drag from his cigarette. "I'm an entertainer, Sam. I sing, I tell jokes. I make people forget their troubles for a couple hours. That's my world." "That's exactly why we need you." Giancana sat down uninvited, leaning forward with the intensity of a man who was used to getting what he wanted. "You know Tony Accardo's nephew, Vince?" Dean nodded slowly. Vince Accardo was young, ambitious, and dangerously stupid, a combination that had caused ripples throughout the organization. "Kid's gone rogue," Giancana continued, "started his own operation, stepping on toes from here to Chicago. He's got some young hotshots backing him, thinks he's untouchable because of his uncle's name. But Tony's old school, he won't protect the kid if he's breaking the rules. Problem is, if we handle this the traditional way, it starts a war. Families take sides, blood gets spilled, and the feds come sniffing around. And you think I can what? Sing him into submission?" Dean's tone was light, but his mind was already working through the implications. "I think you can talk to him. Man to man. You got respect on both sides, Dean. You grew up in the life but got out clean. You're friends with everyone from Frank to the Kennedy brothers. You understand honor, but you also understand the new world we're living in. If anyone can make Vince see reason, it's you." Dean stubbed out his cigarette, his jaw tight. "And if he doesn't want to listen?" Giancana stood, buttoning his jacket. "Then we do things the old way, and a lot of people suffer, including some you care about. The Sands, the Rat Pack, all of it, it exists because of a balance. Vince is threatening that balance. We need someone to restore the harmony before the whole song falls apart." After they left, Dean sat alone in his dressing room staring at his reflection in the mirror. The face looking back at him was famous, beloved, the embodiment of cool sophistication. But underneath he was still Dino from Steubenville, the kid who'd learned early that sometimes the most powerful weapon wasn't a gun or a fist, it was knowing what to say and when to say it. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Frank? Yeah, it's me. We need to talk." "No, not on the phone. Get Sammy and Joey. We got a situation." If you're already hooked on this incredible true story, smash that like button, and make sure you subscribe because what happens next will blow your mind. The next morning, Dean's suite at the Sands looked less like a hotel room and more like a strategic command center. Frank Sinatra sat by the window, his blue eyes sharp despite the early hour. Sammy Davis Jr. paced near the bar, his energy barely contained. Joey Bishop occupied the corner armchair, quiet but observant, taking in every detail. "So let me get this straight," Frank said, his voice carrying that distinctive edge that could cut through any room. "Sam wants you to play peacemaker with a punk kid who thinks he's the next Al Capone." "That's about the size of it," Dean replied, pouring coffee from a silver service. "Vince Accardo's got delusions of grandeur, started skimming from operations that aren't his, roughing up bookies who are under protection, generally acting like the rules don't apply to him." Sammy stopped pacing. "Why doesn't his uncle handle it? Tony Accardo's got enough juice to shut this down with a phone call." "Because Tony's in a bind," Joey interjected, his analytical mind already piecing together the puzzle. "If he comes down on his own nephew, he looks weak to the young Turks, who think the old guard is past their prime. But if he lets it slide, he loses respect with the other families. It's a no-win situation." Frank lit a cigarette, exhaling slowly. "So they want Dean to do their dirty work." "Not dirty work," Dean corrected. "Diplomacy. There's a difference." "Is there?" Frank's question hung in the air. "Dean, these guys don't understand diplomacy. They understand power and fear. You go in there talking about harmony and balance, and they'll laugh in your face. Or worse." Dean met his friend's gaze. "Then I'll have to speak a language they understand. But not the one you're thinking of." Sammy sat down, leaning forward with interest. "What do you got in mind, Dean?" "Vince and his crew, they're young. They grew up watching movies, listening to our records, dreaming about the glamorous life. They see the surface, the money, the women, the respect, but they don't understand what it costs. They think it's all about being tough, about taking what you want. So you're going to educate them?" Joey asked, skepticism evident in his tone. "I'm going to show them what they're really risking," Dean said. "See, guys like Vince, they think they're invincible. They think the life is all about power. But what they don't realize is that real power in this town comes from something else entirely." Frank stubbed out his cigarette. "And what's that?" "Connection, trust, the ability to bring people together instead of tearing them apart. Vegas works because everyone benefits from the system. The moment someone gets greedy, the moment someone decides they're bigger than the arrangement, the whole thing collapses. And when it collapses, nobody wins. Not the families, not the casino owners, not the entertainers, not the tourists who keep this desert oasis alive." Sammy nodded slowly. "You're going to appeal to his self-interest, show him that he makes more money, has more power and lives longer if he plays by the rules." "Exactly. But I need leverage. I need something that makes him listen instead of just brushing me off as another old-timer trying to hold him back." Frank stood, walking to the window to look out at the strip below. "You need to make him understand that he's not just fighting the old guard, he's fighting the future, and the future doesn't have room for cowboys who can't follow the script. Can you get me a meeting?" Dean asked. Frank turned back, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Dean, I can get you anything. But are you sure you want to do this? Once you step into this, there's no stepping back out. You'll be involved, whether you like it or not." Dean thought about the stage, about the music, about the life he'd built that existed in the space between worlds. He thought about the young men who were about to throw it all away because they didn't understand that some games had rules for a reason. "I'm already involved," he said quietly. "We all are. This town, this life, it's all connected. And if we don't find a way to keep the harmony, the music stops for everyone." Joey stood, adjusting his glasses. "Then we better make sure you've got the right arrangement. Because if you're going to conduct this orchestra, you need to know every instrument and every player." For the next 3 hours they planned. Frank made calls, leveraging relationships that spanned from Hollywood to Chicago. Sammy used his connections in the entertainment world to gather intelligence on Vince's operations and associates. Joey, with his sharp mind for detail, mapped out the power structures and identified the key players who could influence the outcome. By noon they had a plan. It was risky, unconventional, and required Dean to walk a tightrope that would make his stage performances look like child's play. But it was their best shot at preventing a war that would consume everything they built. "One more thing," Frank said as they prepared to leave. "If this goes sideways, if Vince doesn't listen or if someone decides to make a move—" "I know," Dean interrupted, "but that's why it has to be me. I'm the only one who can walk into that room and walk out again no matter what happens. Because at the end of the day, I'm not a threat to anyone. I'm just a singer." Frank gripped his shoulder. "You're a hell of a lot more than that, Pally. Don't forget it. This story is getting intense. Drop a comment below telling us what you think Dean should do. And hit that like button if you're loving this epic tale." The meeting was set for midnight at a warehouse on the outskirts of Las Vegas, far from the glittering lights of the Strip. It was neutral territory owned by a businessman who owed favors to multiple families and therefore had a vested interest in keeping the peace. Dean arrived alone, as agreed, driving his own Cadillac through the empty streets. The warehouse loomed in the darkness, a single light burning above the entrance. Two men stood guard outside, young and nervous, their hands hovering near their jackets in a way that would have been comical if the situation weren't so serious. "Mr. Martin," one of them said, trying to sound tough but unable to hide the awe in his voice. "They're waiting inside." Dean nodded, straightening his tie. "Thanks, kid. Nice night for it, huh?" Inside, the warehouse had been cleared except for a table and chairs in the center, illuminated by a single overhead light that created a circle of brightness in the surrounding darkness. Vince Accardo sat at the head of the table, flanked by four men who looked like they'd stepped out of a James Cagney movie. Slicked back hair, sharp suits and expressions that tried too hard to convey menace. Vince himself was younger than Dean had expected, maybe 28, with his uncle's dark eyes but none of the elder Accardo's gravitas. He leaned back in his chair with studied casualness, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Dean Martin," Vince said, not standing. "The great crooner himself. To what do I owe the honor?" Dean pulled out a chair and sat down without being invited, his movements relaxed and confident. "Vince, nice place you got here. Very atmospheric, very guys and dolls." A flicker of irritation crossed Vince's face. "You got something to say it." "I'm a busy man." "I can see that," Dean replied, looking around at the empty warehouse. "Really packed schedule." "Look, Vince, I'm going to level with you. I'm here because people I respect asked me to talk to you. They think maybe you don't understand the situation you're in." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Vince said, leaning forward. "The old men are scared. They see young guys like me making moves, taking initiative, and they're worried we're going to push them out. Well, guess what? They're right to be worried. This is a new era, and guys like you and my uncle, you're dinosaurs." Dean smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "You know what killed the dinosaurs, Vince? It wasn't that they were too big or too slow, it was that they couldn't adapt when the environment changed. But you know what survived? The small, smart creatures that understood the new rules and worked with them instead of against them." "What's your point?" "My point is that you think you're adapting, but you're actually making the same mistakes that got a lot of guys killed over the years. You're confusing change with chaos. You're thinking short-term instead of long-term. And most importantly, you're forgetting that this whole thing," Dean gestured broadly, "only works because everyone agrees to certain rules." Vince laughed, a harsh sound. "Rules? The only rule is power. You take what you can, you hold what you take, and you don't apologize for it. Is that right?" Dean's voice remained calm, almost conversational. "So tell me, Vince, how much money did you make last month from your operations?" Vince's eyes narrowed. "That's my business. Humor me." "Ballpark figure. 50 grand, maybe 60. What's it to you?" Dean nodded. "Not bad. You know how much the Sands makes in a month? 3 million. You know how much flows through this town in a month, when everything's running smooth? 50 million easy. And you know why? Because tourists feel safe here. Because the games are straight enough that people keep coming back. Because the entertainment is world class. Because there's an infrastructure that makes all of it possible." He leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge. "Now you start a war, you start making headlines, you start making the feds pay attention, and you know what happens? That 50 million becomes 25 million, then 10 million, then this town becomes just another desert outpost that nobody cares about, and your 60 grand a month, that becomes nothing, because there's nothing left to skim from." "You're exaggerating," Vince said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Am I? Ask your uncle about prohibition. Ask him what happened to the guys who got too greedy, too violent, too visible. Ask him about the ones who thought they were untouchable. Where are they now, Vince? They're dead or in prison, and the smart ones, the ones who understood that you make more money in peace than in war, they're the ones who built this." Dean gestured toward the direction of the Strip. "They're the ones who turned a desert into an empire." One of Vince's men spoke up. "So what, we're just supposed to bow down?"
Accept whatever scraps the old guard throws us. Dean turned to him. What's your name, kid? Tommy. Tommy Rosselli. Tommy, you related to Johnny Rosselli? He's my cousin. Good man, Johnny. Smart. You know what he told me once? He said the secret to longevity in this business is knowing when to push and when to wait, when to fight, and when to negotiate, when to be a wolf and when to be a fox. Dean looked back at Vince. Right now you're being a wolf when you should be a fox. You're making noise when you should be making moves. And it's going to get you killed. Is that a threat? Vince's hand moved toward his jacket. It's a fact, Dean said, not flinching. And it's not me you need to worry about. It's the 100 other guys who are watching this situation, waiting to see how it plays out. You think you're the only ambitious young guy in this town. You think you're the only one who wants a bigger piece of the pie. The only reason they're not making moves on you right now is because the old guard is holding them back. But the moment you force their hand, the moment they have to make an example of someone, all those other ambitious guys are going to come for you like sharks smelling blood in the water. The warehouse fell silent. Dean could see the wheels turning in Vince's head, the bravado starting to crack as reality set in. So what do you suggest? Vince asked finally, his voice quieter. Dean smiled. I suggest we make a deal. Don't go anywhere. Subscribe right now because Chapter 4 reveals Dean's master plan, and it's absolutely genius. Dean stood and walked to the edge of the light, his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed, but his mind sharp as a razor. Here's what I'm thinking. Vince, you're ambitious. You're smart enough to have gotten this far and you've got guys willing to follow you. Those are assets. The problem isn't what you want, it's how you're going about getting it. I'm listening, Vince said, and Dean could hear the shift in his tone. The kid was scared now whether he'd admit it or not, and fear made people rational. The families, they're not against expansion, they're not against new blood bringing in new ideas. What they're against is chaos. What they're against is someone operating outside the system in a way that threatens everyone's bottom line. Dean turned back to face the table. So here's the deal. You want your own operation, you can have it, but it's got to be sanctioned, it's got to fit into the larger structure, and it's got to benefit more people than just you and your crew. What kind of operation? Tommy asked, leaning forward with interest. Entertainment, Dean said simply. You guys are young, you understand the new generation. Rock and roll, television, movies, that's where the money's going to be in the next decade. The old guard, they're still thinking nightclubs and casinos, but you could be thinking bigger. Production companies, recording studios, talent management, all legitimate businesses that generate real money and give you real power. Vince frowned. You want me to go legit? I want you to go smart, Dean corrected. Look, the days of running numbers and bootlegging booze, those days are ending. The real money now is in entertainment and real estate. You set up a production company, you start signing young talent, you produce shows for television, you're making millions and it's all legal. Well, mostly legal, he added with a slight smile. There's always room for creative accounting, and the families would go for. Vince asked skeptically. The families would love it, Dean said, because it gives them a way to wash money, it gives them legitimate business interests, and it keeps the feds off their backs. Plus you'd be creating jobs, bringing in talent, making Vegas even more of an entertainment capital. Everybody wins. He walked back to the table and sat down, looking directly at Vince. But here's the catch. You do this, you do it with their blessing. You bring them in as silent partners, you give them a piece of the action, and in return you get their protection, their connections, and their expertise. You become part of the system instead of fighting against it.
And if I say no? Vince asked. Dean's expression hardened. Then you're on your own, kid. And I give you 6 months before someone puts a bullet in you. Not because they want to, but because they have to. Because you'll have forced their hand, and they can't let that kind of disrespect stand. The silence stretched out, heavy and oppressive. Dean could see Vince weighing his options, pride warring with pragmatism. Finally, Tommy spoke up again. What would we need to do to set this up? Dean smiled. Now they were talking business. First, you apologize. Not publicly, but to the right people. You acknowledge that you overstepped, and you ask for their guidance moving forward. That's the price of admission. You swallow your pride and show respect. And then we set up a meeting with the key players. Sam Giancana, Tony Accardo, Mo Delitz, a few others. We present the plan. We work out the details, and we make it official. You get your operation, they get their piece, and everyone moves forward together. Vince stubbed out his cigarette, his jaw tight. And you? What do you get out of this? Me? Dean stood, preparing to leave. I get to keep singing in a town that isn't tearing itself apart. I get to keep working with people I respect, without worrying about who's going to get killed next. And I get to sleep at night knowing that I helped prevent a war that would have hurt a lot of innocent people. He paused at the edge of the light. Plus, if this works out, maybe you sign some of the talent I recommend. I know a lot of young singers and comedians who could use a break. Vince laughed. A genuine sound this time. You're something else, Martin. You come in here, tell me I'm an idiot, offer me a way out, and then try to get a commission on top of it. That's show business, kid. Dean said with a grin. Everything's negotiable, and everyone gets a piece. That's how you build something that lasts. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. One more thing, Vince. This deal, it only works if you're serious about it. If you take the meeting and then go back to your old ways, there won't be another chance. The old guard, they're willing to give you this opportunity because they respect potential. But respect has to be earned, and it has to be maintained. You understand? Vince nodded slowly. I understand. Good. I'll set up the meeting for next week. In the meantime, you shut down any operations that are stepping on toes. You make peace with the people you've pissed off, and you start thinking about what kind of entertainment company you want to build. Because when we walk into that meeting, you better have a plan that makes everyone want to invest. As Dean reached the door, Tommy called out, Mr. Martin, why did you really do this? Why stick your neck out for guys you don't even know? Dean considered the question, his hand on the door handle. Because I've seen what happens when the music stops, Tommy. I grew up in a town where the steel mills closed and people lost everything. I've watched friends destroy themselves because they couldn't adapt to a changing world. And I've learned that the only way to survive, really survive, is to find harmony even in chaos. To build bridges instead of burning them. To understand that we're all in this together, whether we like it or not. He pushed open the door, letting in the cool desert air. Besides, he added with a smile, I'm a singer, harmony is what I do. This is incredible. Hit that like button if you're amazed by Dean's brilliance, and comment below, do you think Vince will take the deal? 1 week later, the meeting took place in a private dining room at the Desert Inn, far from prying eyes and listening ears. The room was elegant but understated, with dark wood paneling, and a long table that could seat 20. Today it held 12 men who collectively controlled more wealth and power than most governments. Dean arrived early, as was his custom, and took a seat in the middle of the table rather than at either end. It was a deliberate choice. He was there as a mediator, not as a participant in the power structure. Sam Giancana arrived next, followed by Tony Accardo, whose weathered face betrayed no emotion as he took his seat. Mo Delitz, Meyer Lansky's representative, and several other key figures filled in the remaining chairs. Vince Accardo arrived last, flanked by Tommy and one other associate. He dressed conservatively, in a dark suit that wouldn't have looked out of place in a boardroom. His expression was serious, the cocky bravado from the warehouse replaced by something more measured. Gentlemen, Dean began, standing to address the room, thank you for coming. We're here today because we have an opportunity to turn a potential problem into a profitable solution, an opportunity to bring new blood and new ideas into our operations while maintaining the structure and respect that has made this town successful. He gestured to Vince. Vince Accardo has something to say. Vince stood and Dean could see the effort it took for the young man to meet his uncle's eyes. Mr. Accardo, Mr. Giancana, gentlemen, I want to apologize. I overstepped. I acted without respect for the system that my uncle and all of you built. I thought I was being smart, being ambitious, but I was really just being reckless. And I'm here today to ask for your guidance and your blessing to do things the right way. Tony Accardo's expression didn't change, but Dean caught the slight nod. Approval, or at least acknowledgement. Dean Martin has proposed an idea, Vince continued, his confidence growing. A production company that would focus on the new entertainment landscape, television, rock and roll, youth-oriented content. It would be a legitimate business that could also serve as a vehicle for the family's interests. I've put together a business plan, and I'd like to present it for your consideration. For the next hour, Vince laid out his vision. He'd done his homework, researching the television industry, identifying gaps in the market, and proposing specific shows and talent that could be developed. Tommy presented financial projections that showed how the company could be profitable within 2 years, and could provide significant returns for investors within 5. Dean watched the faces around the table, seeing interest replace skepticism. These were businessmen, after all, and Vince was speaking their language now, the language of profit and opportunity. When the presentation ended, Sam Giancana spoke first. It's ambitious, it's also risky. Television is a new game, and we don't have the same connections there that we have in other industries. That's where I come in, Dean said. I've got relationships with the networks, with producers, with talent. I can open doors and make introductions. I can help guide the company in its early stages, make sure it doesn't make rookie mistakes. And what do you want in return? Mo Dalitz asked, his sharp eyes studying Dean. 10% of the company, Dean said simply. Not for the money, I don't need it, but because if I've got skin in the game, people will take it seriously. They'll know it's not just a front, it's a real business with real potential. Meyer Lansky's representative leaned forward. And the families, what's the split? Vince took a breath. I'm proposing that I retain 40%, with the remaining 50% divided among the investing families based on their contribution. The company would be structured so that major decisions require majority approval, ensuring that no one person can act unilaterally. It was a smart proposal, Dean thought. Vince kept enough control to run the business, but not enough to go rogue again. The families got a significant stake without having to manage day-to-day operations, and the approval structure ensured accountability. Tony Accardo finally spoke, his voice gravelly with age but still commanding. My nephew made mistakes, serious mistakes, but he's also shown that he can learn, that he can adapt. That's worth something. He looked directly at Vince. You do this, you do it right, you honor your commitment, you show respect, and you remember that this opportunity exists, because people were willing to give you a second chance. Not everyone gets that. I understand, Uncle Tony, Vince said quietly, and I won't waste it. The vote was unanimous. The production company would be established, with the families as investors, and Vince as the managing partner. Dean would serve as an advisor and would help recruit talent. Within 6 months, they'd produce their first television pilot. Within a year they'd have 3 shows on the air. As the meeting broke up and men shook hands, sealing deals that would shape Las Vegas for the next decade, Dean found himself standing with Sam Giancana near the window, looking out at the strip. You did good, Dean, Sam said, lighting a cigar. You found a way to give everyone what they wanted without anyone losing face. That's a rare talent. It's just harmony, Sam, Dean replied. Every good song needs it. You got your melody, you got your rhythm, but without harmony, it's just noise. What we did today, we found the harmony. You really believe that? That this life, this business, it's like music? Dean considered the question, watching the lights of the casinos flicker in the distance. I think everything's like music, Sam. You got your high notes and your low notes, your fast parts and your slow part. You got moments of discord that make the resolution sweeter, and you got performers who understand that the best performances aren't about showing off, they're about making everyone else sound good too. Sam laughed, a genuine sound. You're a philosopher, Dean. Who knew? Nah, Dean said with a smile. I'm just a kid from Steubenville who learned early that you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, and that sometimes the best way to win a fight is to make sure nobody has to fight at all. The production company that Vince Accardo founded that day became one of the most successful independent studios of the 1960s and 70s. It launched the careers of dozens of performers, produced hit television shows, and generated millions in revenue for its investors. More importantly, it provided a template for how the families could transition from traditional rackets into legitimate businesses, a shift that would define the next era of organized crime in America. Vince himself became a respected figure in the entertainment industry, known for his eye for talent and his ability to navigate the complex world where art and commerce intersected. He never forgot the lesson Dean Martin taught him in that warehouse, that real power comes not from taking what you want, but from building something that benefits everyone. As for Dean, he continued to perform, to charm audiences, and to move between worlds with an ease that seemed effortless but was actually the result of a lifetime of careful observation and hard-won wisdom. He never spoke publicly about his role in preventing what could have been a devastating mob war. That wasn't his style,
but those who were there, those who understood what had really happened in those tense weeks in 19. Dean Martin had done something remarkable. He'd taken a situation that was heading toward violence and bloodshed, and he'd transformed it into opportunity and prosperity. He'd found harmony in chaos, melody in discord. He'd done what he did best. He'd made everyone else sound good. Years later, when asked about his greatest performance, Dean would smile that enigmatic smile and say, "Every night on stage, Pally, every single night." But those who knew him best understood that his greatest performance had nothing to do with singing or comedy. It was the night he walked into a warehouse and talked a young hothead out of starting a war, using nothing but words, wisdom, and an understanding of human nature that was as deep as his voice was smooth. In the end, that's what Dean Martin understood better than almost anyone, that life, like music, is about finding the right notes at the right time, about knowing when to lead and when to follow, about understanding that the most beautiful harmonies come not from everyone singing the same note, but from different voices blending together to create something greater than any of them could achieve alone. That was Dean's gift, that was his legacy, and that was why, decades after his death, people still talk about the night Dean Martin's harmony restored order to Mafia chaos, not with violence, not with threats, but with the same smooth, effortless grace that made him one of the greatest entertainers of all time. Wow, what a story. If you loved this epic tale, smash that like button, subscribe for more incredible stories from Hollywood's golden age, and comment below telling us your favorite Dean Martin moment. We read every single comment. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest power is knowing what to say and when to say it. Until next time.